Rent is usually calculated from what the market will support. A simple case is this. A landlord compares similar apartments nearby before setting a price. The important driver is that location, size, condition, and demand shape the number. That is why the rent is not only based on what the owner wants. Comparable rentals matter. You might see it when a two-bedroom unit is often judged against other two-bedroom units in the same area. What matters underneath is that recent listings and signed leases reveal market range. If it is ignored, asking far above similar units can leave a property empty. Location can outweigh size. One ordinary version is a small apartment near jobs, schools, or transport may rent higher than a larger distant one. The mechanism is that daily convenience becomes economic value. The practical effect is tenants pay for saved time as well as square footage. Property condition changes rent. Consider renovated kitchens, reliable air conditioning, clean common areas, and good security can justify more. The hidden part is that condition affects comfort and maintenance risk. The outcome is often that poor condition pushes tenants to demand a lower price. Amenities add perceived value. The pattern shows up when parking, gym access, elevators, storage, balcony space, and laundry can move the rent. The moving force is that amenities reduce outside costs or improve convenience. The risk is that their value depends on whether tenants actually use them. Landlord costs influence the floor price. In a daily situation, mortgage payments, property taxes, insurance, repairs, management fees, and vacancies must be covered somehow. The link is that owners may not get every cost back immediately. Once that link matters, but high costs pressure them to raise rent when the market allows. Vacancy risk affects pricing. The clearest example is an empty unit earns nothing, so a slightly lower rent can be better than waiting months. The explanation starts with landlords balance price against speed. The consequence is the best rent is often the highest price that still attracts a reliable tenant. Demand changes seasonally. For example, families may move before school terms, while job markets create relocation waves. The reason is that timing affects competition. That can mean the same apartment can attract different rent depending on when it is listed. Lease length can affect rent. In real life, a longer lease may give stability to both sides, while a shorter lease gives flexibility. The pressure comes from this. Landlords may charge more for flexibility. The result can be tenants may accept a higher rate if they avoid long commitment. Included utilities change comparison. Think of one unit may include water, internet, or cooling while another does not. The process works because the headline rent can mislead. Over time, tenants should compare monthly total cost, not only the rent line. Furnished units are priced differently. A simple case is this. Furniture, appliances, and shorter setup time can raise rent. The important driver is that the landlord takes on wear and replacement risk. That is why the tenant pays for convenience and lower moving effort. Regulation may limit increases. You might see it when some markets restrict how quickly rent can rise or require formal notice. What matters underneath is that legal rules shape landlord pricing power. If it is ignored, a tenant should check local rules before assuming any increase is valid. Income levels influence affordability. One ordinary version is landlords watch what local tenants can realistically pay. The mechanism is that if wages lag behind rents, vacancies or roommate demand may rise. The practical effect is rent cannot rise forever without affecting occupancy. Competition among landlords matters. Consider new buildings can give tenants more choices and slow rent growth. The hidden part is that limited supply gives owners more power. The outcome is often that rent is partly a result of how many similar homes are available. Repairs and upgrades need payback. The pattern shows up when a landlord who renovates may raise rent to recover investment. The moving force is that the upgrade must still match tenant demand. The risk is that expensive improvements do not guarantee higher rent if the market will not support it. Risk affects screening and pricing. In a daily situation, a tenant with unstable income may face rejection or stricter terms. The link is that landlords price and screen to protect cash flow. Once that link matters, strong applications reduce uncertainty. Negotiation depends on leverage. The clearest example is a tenant may negotiate when the unit has been empty or similar properties are cheaper. The explanation starts with a landlord has more leverage when many applicants are waiting. The consequence is evidence works better than emotion in rent negotiation. Rent is not the same as value to every tenant. For example, one person may pay more for pet permission, another for parking, another for quiet. The reason is that features have different personal value. That can mean good comparison starts with what actually matters to the renter. A fair rent is usually a market range, not one exact number. In real life, similar homes create a band of reasonable prices. The pressure comes from this. The final figure depends on timing, condition, included costs, and negotiation. The result can be both sides should understand the reasons behind the number. Rent calculation becomes clearer when it is tested in ordinary life. Take nearby comparable apartments. The point is visible in nearby comparable apartments. The choice changes because rent calculation changes the pressure around the decision. What matters is the real consequence for the people involved, not just the clean definition of rent calculation. When the example is concrete, rent calculation stops sounding abstract and starts looking like something people deal with in real conversations, bills, deadlines, and relationships. Another useful angle is building amenities. Vacancy risk shows how one background condition can change the outcome before anyone calls it a big event. For rent calculation, the hidden force is the comparison between similar homes, local demand, and the landlord-a-Euro-s cost. Once those inputs are visible, the monthly number looks less arbitrary. Rent becomes easier to judge when the number is connected to location, demand, property condition, operating cost, and comparable nearby homes. A weak reading assumes rent is only greed and misses vacancy, competition, maintenance, and location. In the case of vacancy risk, the final result may look simple from the outside, but the pressure was already building before anyone noticed it. Better judgment starts by comparing the home against nearby options with similar features. A practical example is landlord mortgage and maintenance costs. The practical point is not to memorize a slogan about rent calculation. The practical point is to challenge or accept rent with evidence, not just frustration. That contrast explains why similar apartments can still command different rents. Most confusion around rent calculation comes from missing that hidden exchange and focusing only on the surface event. Rent is not picked from a single number. It is shaped by comparable homes, demand, property costs, risk, and how badly each side needs the deal. A final example, seasonal demand, shows why this matters before the outcome becomes expensive, stressful, or emotionally charged. The strongest takeaway is to compare the rent against evidence from the local market. The practical point is to challenge or accept rent with evidence, not just frustration. Once those parts are visible, rent calculation becomes less mysterious and much easier to handle in daily life.